Hey, secret friends, welcome back to the Spotlight. This is, of course, our show where we talk to folks in the creative space who make the stuff that we enjoy. And we are here today with not only a comic guy, but a Star Trek guy and a guy who's done, looking at his resume, all the stuff I know that I love. I'm super psyched to talk to Glenn Greenberg. Man, how are you tonight?
I'm doing fine. Yourself?
I'm doing great. Yeah. So, no, thanks for sitting down with us.
Thanks for
I've been
inviting me.
Yeah, you bet. I've been roping Peter more into doing comic book stuff because I'm kind of polluting him with the comic book methodology as time goes by. We've been recording together 5 years,
I think
so
comics are just getting into them slowly.
I know I'm trying to push him in front of the moving train here. So thanks for being a part of it today,
Uh,
Glenn. But yeah, let's start from the start, man. Tell me how you got into the business. How'd you get into comics? How'd you get into all of it?
well, comics I got into as a very young child. I would say I was probably around five or six, and I was watching the Batman TV show with Adam West every day.
Oh
It was in
yeah,
reruns at that point, so every
yeah.
day at around 4:30 in the afternoon on Channel 11 here in New York. And so my older brother was a comic book reader, and he was away at college. And I was rummaging through his closet, and I found Batman comic books, and I was like, "Oh
Nice.
wow, he's in comic books too." And so the interest was automatic at that point. And
Mhm.
then from there, I think that's where I discovered the Incredible Hulk. And within a year or two of me finding my brother's Hulk comic books, that the Hulk TV show premiered on
Yep.
CBS in
Yeah.
November 1977 around.
Sounds about
And
right.
yeah, and so it's probably no coincidence that Batman's my favorite DC character, the Hulk is my favorite Marvel character. And it just kind of escalated from there. From there, the Superman movie came out, and I discovered Spider-Man, and before you knew it, that's
Everything.
was my great interest.
Yeah.
In terms of how I got into the business, I had decided in my senior year of college that I didn't want to become a lawyer. I wanted to get into the arts, and I was either going to choose filmmaking or comics. And as it turned out, I actually knew somebody who was at Marvel. I'd known him since I was about 12. His name is Bob Budiansky.
Oh,
Uh,
we've had Bob on the show too.
yeah,
Great guy.
yeah. I met Bob when I was 12. He was an editor at the time, and he rose up through the ranks by the time I was a senior in college. And I reached out to him and asked him for advice, and he actually had me come in at one point on a job interview after I graduated. And I didn't get that particular position, but within a few months, another position opened up in his department. By that point, I was doing some freelance for Marvel, and I happened to be visiting the office one day to drop off a freelance assignment. And he saw me in the hall. He came up to me and stuck his finger right in my face and goes, "I want to talk to you." He goes, I want to. There's a position in my department. I want to interview you for it." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." By that point, I was working as an editorial assistant at a mass market book company,
Hmm.
Putnam Berkeley. And things were going fine, but I really wanted to work in comics. So
Yeah.
I went for the job interview, and I guess in this particular case, the second time was the charm because
Yeah.
Bob hired me as an assistant editor in the special projects. And that's where it all began. I started out working on the trading cards, the Marvel Masterpieces trading cards, and all
Oh,
the various trading cards that came.
big collector of those.
Yeah, the Joe
Me, yeah.
Jusko. The Joe Jusko set
Yeah.
was my first assignment.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Um, I put together a lot of the stuff for the Mark Bagley Spider-Man set,
Ah,
which was fantastic.
I love Mark Bagley.
I
Love his
think
stuff.
the only major trading card set I didn't work on it during that era because I wasn't there yet was the Jim Lee X-Men set. That was right
Oh,
before I got to Marvel.
yeah.
But I was there for a lot of the other sets, and then gradually I drifted into my first editor that I worked directly under, Tom Brevoort. He managed the trading cards, and then eventually we kind of drifted into the comic books, primarily Spider-Man and
Hmm.
books that were related to Spider-Man. And within a few years, he rose up through the ranks, and I rose up through the ranks, and they broke us up because I couldn't be his assistant anymore because I was editing my own books at that point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that was it. And once I was editing my own stuff, I was generating projects. Probably the most high profile now, right at this moment, is the Incredible Hulk versus Superman,
Oh
that
yeah.
Marvel DC crossover. And I edited the last Moon Knight series written by Moon Knight's creator, Doug Mensch.
Oh yeah.
And
Doug mentioned I have the same birthday. It's on my Marvel calendar every year.
oh
Isn't that
yeah,
weird?
yeah. He was a trip. He was a trip. And he and I are, I still stay in touch with him from time to time. He's one of those guys that I kind of bonded with, when I was
Yeah.
there. And there's certain people that, you work with, and then once you're not there anymore, you go your own separate ways, and you
I
never
know.
really
I know the feeling.
talk again. But
Yeah.
I stayed in touch. Doug is one of the people that I stayed in touch with, as is
Yeah.
Roger Stern,
Oh yeah.
JM DeMatteis.
Oh, JM's great. We've had him
Yeah,
on too. Yeah. We've
he's
been lucky.
terrific.
Yeah.
He was a
Yeah.
mentor of mine in many ways. So yeah. So that's how I
Awesome.
got in.
Good deal. All right. I'll let Peter talk for a minute.
Okay. So you've already mentioned that you've worked on a bunch of the bigger characters, like a bunch of the different stuff in Marvel. You got to touch like Superman and DC.
Yeah.
You worked on a couple different Star Trek things.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, you're working with pre-existing characters, ideas, and universes, which can always get a little tricky. So how do you go about capturing the voice or the essence of those characters to make them like be them when
Okay.
you're going with them?
That is an excellent question. And I
Yay.
will tell you that I discovered Star Trek through the animated series, probably around 1974, 75.
Nice.
But I wasn't into Star Trek yet.
Yeah.
I really wasn't. My older brother and sister were very much into it, and we used to fight over the television. They wanted to watch Star Trek every night. I wanted to watch the Brady Bunch, and because I was the baby in the family, I
Yeah.
used to win. My sister took me to see Star Trek: The Motion Picture when it was still in the theaters, and that's when that was I consider that a very good first date. Okay. And it really sparked my interest. That's when I started watching the TV show on a more regular basis. And I started buying all the novels. And
Yeah.
to get to the heart of your question, some of the novels stunk.
Oh yeah.
And-
We talk about them. Our biggest show is a bi-weekly Star Trek show, so we know.
Yeah. So some of the novels were just awful, and some of the novels were fantastic. And what I realized, and this is like back at when I was like 10 or 11 years old, the novels that I thought were great were the ones where the characters' voices sounded authentic, where you could picture the actors saying the lines, and the universe was accurately portrayed. So the technology worked the way it did on the TV show, and the universe was consistent with the way it was on the TV show. The writers didn't take liberties and try to reshape the Star Trek universe to suit their sensibilities. They reshaped their sensibilities to suit the Star Trek universe. Those were the novels that I like, and by the time I was like 12 or 13, it became an ambition of mine to write a Star Trek novel. And when I set out to do that, or write the Star Trek comic books. So when I set out to do that, it was like, I want it to be the kind of book that I like to read. So I started doing fan fiction, illustrated fan fiction. I would write and draw my own Star Trek comics, starting when I was like 12, because the Wrath of Khan hit me like a ton of bricks.
I hear you.
And so that really inspired me. So I started, writing and drawing my own Star Trek comics. Little did I know that was basically training for the future. So by the time we're talking 82 to 98, we're talking 16 years later, by the time I was working on Star Trek professionally, I'd already had like a few years in my teens where I was like writing and drawing Star Trek all the time, and it was always in my head. So I was preparing myself, not knowing I was preparing myself for future work, basically.
Yeah.
And so that's how I did it, by practice that I didn't get paid for, but nonetheless, it was very valuable because it gave me experience, coming up with stories for these characters and figuring out, how the characters would react in a given situation, how they would talk. And that came from just watching the series over and over and over again, and watching the movies over and over again. And that's how I did it.
Yeah, man, that's us.
Makes sense.
Well, I'll stay on the same theme, man. In the '90s, Marvel had the license starting in I think '96 or
90,
'97. They had
yeah,
it
about
for
96. Yeah.
yeah, you had it just until about '98 or so, and then I know it
Yeah.
moved away from Marvel. But I was in college at the time, avid weekly reader of not only that and the superhero stuff, which I'll talk. I'm a Spider-Man guy, which I'll talk to you about in a minute.
Okay.
But that Untold Voyages 5-part miniseries, I've told Peter about this in the past. Each issue was a year in that 5-issue miniseries.
Yeah.
I currently, because it's out of print, I currently don't have the issues because I had to sell my comics years back before I got back into it. So I got to just finally find me a set. I just got to kind of find to rip the Band-Aid off. But I loved it so much. I really do remember, like Peter, you appreciate this. I think it's an issue 3 or 4, they switch from the motion picture outfits to the Monster Maroon. Peter and I both have nice Monster Maroons. We're costumers,
Uh-huh.
which I really appreciated when that happened. But tell me about that series. I mean, you've already kind of teed it up that you're a big motion picture Wrath of Khan guy. So
Mhm.
it definitely see how that would kind of seep in. But tell me how you put that together.
Well, Marvel had done a Star Trek series starting in 1980.
Yes,
It
I've
only
got all
last
the issues.
Yeah,
I've
it
got all
only
the
last
issues. Yeah.
yeah, it only lasted 18 issues. It was set after the motion picture. It wasn't very good.
No, it
There,
was terrible.
there
Frankly.
were a couple of decent issues here and there, but overall it wasn't very successful and it wasn't very good overall. But it was so much potential. There was so much potential in that era.
Mhm.
And what happened was Marvel got the license again in 96. I wasn't working on any of them, but a friend of mine was, Tim Toohey. So he and I were both editors at Marvel at the same time. And we were hanging out in his office one night after hours. And I said to him, you know what you ought to do? Because he was doing the books that were really sort of that had to go through the likeness approvals, uh,
Mm,
Yeah.
where the actors would sign off to make sure that oh yes, but that likeness of me is okay. I'll sign off on that. He was doing those where I believe Bobby Chase was doing the more original type of stuff where you didn't have to deal with actors or
yeah. She was
likenesses.
on G.I. Joe, I think, because I was a big G.I. Joe fan. I think she was an editor on that book, I think. I
Oh,
could be wrong.
I don't know about that, but I know
Yeah.
for sure that she was editing half the Star Trek line and Tim was editing the other. And so
Oh, gotcha.
I was hanging out in his office and I said, "You know what you ought to do?" I said, "You should do a series that you should do the old Marvel series again, but this time do it right." You know,
Yeah.
this time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you'll have access to all the characters and the events that the original Marvel series couldn't, because the original Marvel series was very restricted. It had a contract with
Mm.
Paramount. They could not refer to anything other than what was in the motion picture.
Oh,
So they
geez.
they couldn't bring back characters from the TV series. They couldn't, do this. They couldn't do that. They couldn't even like bring in alien races that were not represented in the
So
motion
they
That's
picture.
couldn't bring in,
that's
like, Romulans or
that's
anything.
No,
tough. So it was
no.
just Klingons and nothing else, right?
That's why that you kept seeing Klingons over and over again. Or theoretically, they could have brought back one of the alien races that you saw in the background.
Right, in the
Uh,
rec deck scene, right.
yeah, the
Oh,
rec
okay.
deck. So,
Yeah.
or,
The
or the or the
Millennium Falcon.
Deltans. They could have brought
Yeah.
back the Deltans.
Right.
The bald characters.
Yeah.
So so
Very, very thin portfolio of
yeah,
choice. Yeah.
exactly. So I said, we don't have that restriction anymore. So, you can do that. Like that period of time is so underutilized, and Tim is like, yeah, I'm listening. I'm listening. I said, and what you could do is, yeah, I said, why don't you do like start off like with a limited series, and it could be like 5 issues, and do Captain Kirk's second 5-year mission on the Enterprise. And each issue goes 1 year deeper into the 5-year mission. And he's like, I'm listening. And I said, "And you could do like more personal stories. Like, you could set up where the characters are in the Wrath of Khan, because there's this big gap between motion picture and Wrath of Khan. And the characters are,
Mhm.
in different places from where they are. And you can explain why Kirk, accepted a promotion back to being an admiral again. And how did Spock become captain of the Enterprise? And, how did Chekhov end up on the, and he's like, I'm listening, and I'm
Mhm.
just spitballing ideas. Again, I'm just trying to help a friend,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't lobbying for the gig. And after a while, Tim's just looking at me and he's like, "Why are you still here? Go home and write the proposal." And I'm like, "Me?" He goes, "Yeah, why not?" I said, "Okay." And I
Yeah.
went home.
Awesome.
I wrote up the proposal. I probably had it for him like the next morning.
Yeah. You're
And
just all on fire. I know what it's
yeah,
like being a writer. I'm a writer. Peter's a writer. You just
yeah,
get your teeth into something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I brought it into him probably the next day, if not maybe 2 days later. And he said, okay. And he sent it off to Paramount. Before you knew it, it was approved by Paramount and we were up and rolling. I put together a pitch explaining what the premise of the series was. And I did a breakdown of what each issue, the premise for each issue. And the only one that Paramount really, actually, there were two issues that Paramount pushed back on. And with one, I agreed, and we ended up doing a better story as a result. On the other one, I pushed back, and to my fortune and to my relief, Paramount relented and let me do the story that I wanted to do.
Good. Good. Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, no, it was 3 issues that I got significant pushback on. And I won 2 of those arguments. Not arguments, but conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the one that the first issue they really pushed back on. And I was like, okay. And I came up with a completely different story, and I thought we were better for it.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. The big corporation actually affecting something positive
Oh,
in
yeah. Oh,
storytelling. It's incredible.
no, they were great. They were great to
Yeah.
work with. And my
Yeah.
understanding is that the regime that we worked with was very different from the regime that, like, say, Peter David had to work with, that basically drove him
Mm.
away from Star Trek for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
I
were
get it.
fortunate to not have to deal with that particular administration.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, the people that we worked with, they just wanted to do good Star Trek,
That's great.
and they were very creator friendly, and they were happy to work with us. And like I said, they didn't tell me the story to write. I want to make that abundantly clear. It's just
Yeah.
they felt like the story that I wanted to do for the first issue was not Star Trek enough, and that's all they
Mm.
said. We'd like you to do something a little more Star Trek. And Tim Toohey and I basically put our heads together and came up with a completely different story that I thought worked really well.
Yeah.
I wanted to use Savick. I wanted to play into her Vulcan Romulan heritage. This was for issue number
Mhm.
2.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we never said on screen that Savick was half Romulan, so you really
Right.
don't have to lean into that. And I was like,
It's non-canonical.
the
Yeah.
fans think of her as half
Right.
Romulan. We're gonna stick, and they were like, okay,
Headcanon.
okay,
Headcanon.
Yep.
that's fine.
It's
Yeah.
widely accepted by the fans. Let's go for it. Yeah.
It's very
Exactly. I
true.
didn't want to be the one that broke Savick for the fans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Right.
and the third issue was a story that was supposed to be done back in the old television series, and it
Oh,
got
TOS
the
flashback.
the episode got rewritten so heavily that it bore no resemblance. So
Yeah.
I wanted to go back, and it basically involved McCoy's daughter.
Oh, yeah, Joanna. Yeah. Okay.
And
Okay. Yeah. Now I'm
so,
remembering.
yeah. And so the story that I wanted to do, Paramount was a little skittish about, but I managed to talk them off the ledge. I managed to say,
Nice.
no, trust me, I'm not going to do anything bad. They were afraid that I was going to be playing too much into a possible romance between Captain Kirk and Joanna McCoy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I've heard the story, I think. Yeah.
yeah, and I said, "Don't worry, trust me." And they were like, "Okay, we trust you." And I got to do the story exactly the way I wanted to.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Oh,
they
man.
they were great. They were great to work with, and working on the comic led to me. Eventually, I actually wrote some Star Trek professional fiction for Simon and Schuster.
Mhm.
I wrote a couple of the Starfleet Corps of Engineers
Oh, yeah. Okay.
novels or novellas,
Yep.
one of which saw print in a book.
Mhm.
The other one is still available as an ebook. And this gave me an opportunity to write in the next generation time frame.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so I did quite a bit of Star Trek.
I love it. Yeah, we live and breathe it, Peter and I, and then you and I will have a chance to talk about that in person. All right, Peter's got one.
All right. So jumping the metaphorical multiversal fence. So another limited series that you worked on was a limited run of Star-Lord with Timothy Zahn.
Yeah.
Which I was like, wow, I didn't know Timothy Zahn helped work on comics. I know he did the one Mara Jade one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I didn't know that he helped work with Star-Lord.
Mhm.
So I know that was a very different take on the character, at least at the time. So how was it working with Zahn on that and just like coming up with how that story was going to work?
Oh, he was terrific. He was absolutely great to work with. He did um first of all, he adapted to the comic book format like a fish to water. He was very, very adaptable to that, having been primarily a novelist up to that
Hmm.
point. And it was his story. I mean, I basically invited him to do Star Lord, and I sent him all of the previous Star Lord stories that had been done, and left it in his hands. And so it was his idea not to bring back Peter Quill, to basically introduce a new Star Lord that picks up the mantle. In other words, we're not starting from scratch. We're
Right.
not saying that those old stories didn't happen, but we are continuing on, and a new character is coming in and finds Peter Quill's uniform and his abandoned ship, and the mystery is, well, what happened to Peter Quill? And so that was all. That was all. Zahn. That was what he came back to me with, and I was like, okay, great. As long as we didn't kill off Peter Quill, we leave it out there that
Right.
he could come back at some point. I didn't have a problem with that. And
Mhm.
he was great. And we, at the time I left Marvel, he and I were talking about doing a sequel. In fact, if I'm not
Nice.
mistaken, I think he went ahead and just completely on spec wrote the sequel.
Wow.
and
That
sent
sounds about right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sent it to me as I was walking out the door, figuratively speaking. I still have it somewhere, but it basically ended with that. It ended there, and then it took years and years for Star-Lord to come back at Marvel. He was a dead property, and then eventually they brought him back, like in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Um, and set up the version that we see in the movies, basically.
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
Because the Peter Quill that I worked on did not exist in the Marvel universe. He existed in his own little pocket universe somewhere. His Earth was not the Marvel Earth. His Earth did
Right.
not have Spider-Man and the
The
Fantastic
the
Four living
the
on it.
616 or whatever,
Yeah,
however you want to call it. Yeah.
yeah. So that was my Star Lord. That was Timothy Zahn's Star Lord.
Hmm.
They went ahead and just brought him into the Marvel universe proper, and did a whole different take on him. But
Huh.
Zahn was great. He was great to work with, and I had a lot of fun. I'm very proud of that series. Very proud of it.
Well, I will have to dig in. I'm a lifer Marvel Unlimited guy, which I just love because I love the accessibility. I can flip between and read a lot of stuff, and I don't have to dig through my bins. So
Mhm.
I will have to look for that one. What was the publication year of that book?
That would have been 96, I think.
So back in that range. I will check it out.
Yeah, circa
Um,
96.
Yeah, cool. So I'm a big Spider-Man nut. I already mentioned that. You're a Hulk guy. I'm a Spider-Man guy. I'm sure you can see it.
Oh,
It's
I'm a
all over the
Spider-Man
place.
guy too, but
Yeah.
yeah, but
Well,
Hulk
let's
is
talk.
number one. Yeah.
Let's talk about it. So you, the original Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, later the Spectacular Spider-Man, near the end of that run. So we're talking like 262. I
Mhm.
think you were working on it with Roger Stern. Roger Stern's a guy who I'd love to talk to. And you were doing a lot of editing at that time.
Yeah.
Like you edited, I remember the Hobgoblin Lives. There was
Yep.
the Final Adventure and some of the other stuff that was based around the Clone Saga when Peter Parker kind of took off and did his own thing. So
Yeah.
but we've talked we've talked about writing, and we've kind of talked about editing a little bit. So tell me about how editing kind of rolls into writing, because in editing you're editing somebody else's work, but you were
Mhm.
doing a lot of your own. So talk to me about kind of how it all kind of gels together for you, maybe think about Spider-Man in particular around that time period.
Well, with Spider-Man as an editor, it's funny because I was very rarely pitching myself out there for Spider-Man writing work, um, because my function was as one of the editorial team on Spider-Man. So you're not really supposed to work on characters that you're not supposed to really be writing characters that you're editing at Marvel at that
Mhm.
time. It was kind of
Okay.
like, that's considered too much of a conflict of interest by that point. I mean, it worked
Yeah.
for Stan, and it worked for all the other people who followed
Sure.
Stan, who were their own writers and editors at the same time. But it was felt by that point the policy was you shouldn't be writing characters that you edit. But there were exceptions.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
one of them. So with something like, say, Hobgoblin Lives, I mean, that was something that I generated as an editor,
Mhm.
where we were tasked with coming up with additional projects, side projects, limited series, in addition to the regular monthly Spider-Man books. And I knew that Roger Stern had this story in his pocket where
Yeah,
he wanted to resolve the Hobgoblin saga the way he originally
right.
intended.
The true
Uh,
identity of the
and yeah,
character,
the
yeah.
true identity, and the story just got botched for a lot of reasons that are much too long it would take much too long to get into here.
Yeah.
But there was political infighting at the office. There was literal sabotage,
Oh my
that was
gosh.
really unprofessional.
Oh gosh.
This was in the
Yikes.
80s. This was well before I got there.
Oh, so it was
Um,
back during the heyday of the Ned, Flash Thompson framed or Ned
yeah,
Leeds or
yeah.
whatever it is. So
During
yeah,
that period, the
that's
story
when I
got
first became, or 280 or 278 was my first issue that I
okay.
read new,
Yeah,
which was when Flash Thompson was framed and jailed and he almost got killed by the Scourge of the Underworld. That was my first issue.
right. Yeah, that was the story was still going well by at that point. But shortly after that, there was a lot of shenanigans going on with the editor, and there was infighting between him and the creative team on the book, and it just the whole thing got botched. And poor
Yeah,
Peter David had to come in and try to salvage it, and he did the best he could under the circumstances, but it was just a mess. And so Roger
yeah,
Stern was basically on the sidelines. He had left the book already. And he was like, well, that's not how I was going to end it anyway. So I could always come back and do the story the way and so he always floated it out there. So I finally took the bait
yeah,
as an editor, and I brought Roger in, and that's how I functioned as an editor. As a writer on Spider-Man, a lot of the time, because I knew the character so well, because I was an editor, and I was working on that, and I was working
Mhm.
on Untold Tales of Spider-Man, which is another
oh god,
book
great book.
that I helped develop. I was a central figure in developing that book as well. Although I give all the credit to Kurt Busiek, who just took the concept and ran with it.
Yeah,
But there were times where when Ralph Macchio was editing the Spider-Man books, uh, one of his writers had to drop out for an issue or two, or one of the writers would move on, and he had a hole to fill, and he needed like a 3 month gap to fill, and he needed to pull in a writer. Well, Ralph knew that, number one, I knew Spider-Man. Number two, that I could write, because at that point my writing career was starting to take off. So Ralph would come to me and he'd say, can you write the next 3 issues of Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man? Could you come up with a storyline? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I came up with Goblins at the Gate.
yeah.
And I pulled in Roger Stern to write that with me because it was a Hobgoblin story. I felt, he should,
My favorite villain, hands
yeah,
down. Maybe because I'm an '80s kid in Spider-Man,
sure.
and he's a villain. He's the villain of the '80s until Venom comes along. But yeah, he
Yeah.
was always my favorite.
Yeah,
But
he was
still,
a favorite of mine too. Um,
yeah,
Untold Tales of Spider-Man, I wrote a few issues with Kurt under a pseudonym because that was really pushing the law at Marvel,
yeah.
because that was a book that I was physically editing.
Breaking the Prime Directive there, huh?
Yeah.
So bending it.
But Kurt was really sick at the time, and he needed
Oh,
somebody
yeah,
who really knew the book and really knew the time frame and knew the characters and all that. So I agreed to do it under a pseudonym.
yeah,
So I worked on those issues. It was just like 2 or 3 issues, maybe just
yeah,
two. And so those and there was only I think there was only 1 or 2 cases where I actually had a Spider-Man story that I wanted to tell, and I
yeah,
pitched the editor.
yeah.
And so I
Awesome.
did those. Yeah,
I
Nice.
love it. Good stuff. Good
I
stuff.
loved it too.
Yeah, Peter. Wrap us up.
All right. So, if you were given carte blanche, free reign, all of that, is there a particular story that you would love to tell, or a particular character you would love to write that you have or haven't already?
That in at Marvel or just in comics in general?
In general.
Oh
Just,
wow,
just
okay. Um, I think the one character I don't think I've ever touched in any capacity was Batman. So I'd be
Mm,
really interested in doing a Batman story. I could at least say that I edited a story featuring Superman. I'm one of the few Marvel editors on the planet who can say they edited a story featuring Superman.
mhm.
So if it was a case of a character that I've never touched that I've always wanted to, that would probably be Batman.
yeah. What would you have him do?
Um, act like normal, well-adjusted human being for
Oh
starters.
God, pure fantasy, right? Pure fantasy.
Well, I grew up because you had mentioned you were an '80s kid with Spider-Man, and that's why
Yep.
you lean towards the Hobgoblin. Well, I was also an '80s kid with Batman when he was still, I loved the Steve Englehart, Len Wein, Jerry Conway, Doug Mensch
Mm,
Batman, where yeah, he had his obsessions. He could be very intense and serious, but he wasn't a xenophobe. And he was
yeah.
able
Yeah.
to maintain successful relationships with the people who loved him, like say Dick Grayson, Alfred,
Mm.
Commissioner
Yeah.
Gordon.
Yeah.
He could maintain normal, healthy relationships with the people that were
He was
closest to him.
he was still a functional human person.
Yeah, he didn't
Yeah.
drive them away. So
Yeah.
that's the Batman that I remember. So that would be that would be step number one.
Yeah.
And so just put him in a story where he's able to to act like somebody that you might want to
Quick, be
spend a few
normal.
minutes with. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Oh my God. Well, this has been totally awesome. Oh my God.
Okay.
Just flipping out with somebody about 80s and 90s Spider-Man. But this has been great. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person when we're at Trek Long Island. And
Well,
I'm gonna
same
put
here.
the links. Yeah, I'm gonna put the links in the show notes so people can come and join us there. That's in June. This is going to be out in early May. But tell us some other stuff that you're working on right now and maybe where people can find you out there.
Well, thanks for asking. I have a new book out right now. It came out just a couple of weeks ago. It's called "The Beatles in America: The Touring Years."
Right,
And
I saw it on your socials, and I'm a
yeah.
huge Beatles guy. That was my
Oh, great.
introduction to popular music. Huge Beatles guy.
Oh, terrific. You'll probably love this book. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. You can get it at Stop and Shop. You can get it from the direct from the publisher. If you go to magazineshop.us and type in Beatles, it'll come right up. I've been doing that a lot over the last 5 or 6 years. These are nonfiction. They're called bookazines because they're magazine sized, but they're serious, in-depth examinations of any particular given pop culture topic. So I've written 5 books now about the Beatles. I've written
Wow.
about the history of Star Trek. About the history of Star Wars, Indiana Jones.
Oh,
Um,
this is my jam.
Only the small franchises. Only the small.
Yeah, no big swings.
Um,
Have you written about the Monkeys? Because it's right behind your head there, and I'm a big fan of the Monkeys.
Oh, that actually belongs to my wife. I actually bought that for my
Oh,
wife. She's the huge Monkeys fan. I just
oh
like
my
the
gosh.
Monkeys, but she's the big fan.
I
But
discovered them just before the Beatles because they,
so
they,
did
they
I.
started rerunning the show
Yep.
on MTV in 1987
Okay.
when I was 11 years old, and so I became a Monkeys junkie.
Well, I was watching the Monkeys at the same time that when I discovered Batman. And so I
Oh
was
my
watching the
gosh.
Monkeys every day. And then in 1977, I discovered the Beatles, and there was no turning back.
Oh
Um,
God, we live parallel lives. We're gonna be best friends. I just got a feeling.
but in addition to all the other, I've written histories about Marvel, Stan Lee, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and even Dracula.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So yes,
Oh my.
that's over the last 6 years. These are all nonfiction books, beautifully illustrated with photographs and illustrations and all that kind of stuff. They're comprehensive, but they're nice short reads that aren't a big commitment. And I do them for a variety of publishers. I did some of them for Time magazine,
Yeah.
the special editions, and I'm doing them now for McClatchy, which is a major publisher. And like I said, the latest one that's out now is called "The Beatles in America: The Touring Years," and that's my latest.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And I also have your website listed here, so I'm sure people can find links over there as well. Correct?
great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good deal. Well, God, man, thank you for being here so much. Listeners,
pleasure.
thanks for tuning in. Remember, you can find all of our stuff over at our Patreon at patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. We've got now almost 75 great interviews with wonderful creators like our guest tonight, Glenn Greenberg. Glenn,
Thank
we
you.
will see you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you next month.
You bet.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.